His small hands trembled as he placed the final piece into his homemade invention. The other students walking past his table without even a glance as they headed toward the more impressive displays created by kids whose parents were engineers and scientists. 10-year-old Miguel Rodriguez stood alone beside his recycled cardboard project in the corner of the school gymnasium, while teachers and judges flocked to the elaborate presentations with flashing lights and touchscreen interfaces. Miguel had spent 3 months collecting discarded water bottles from trash cans and dumpsters, transforming them into a revolutionary water filtration system that could purify contaminated water using only materials found in landfills. Nobody noticed the quiet boy from the subsidized housing complex whose mother worked 2 jobs to support them. Nobody asked about his inspiration or the hours he spent at the public library researching environmental solutions. Nobody even bothered to stop at his table until the head judge, a professor from the prestigious technical university, picked up Miguel's filter and gasped in astonishment. If you believe in the power of overlooked genius and want to see underdogs triumph against all odds, please subscribe to our channel now for more inspiring stories that will restore your faith in human potential. The morning bell rang through the hallways of Washington Elementary School as Miguel Rodriguez slipped quietly into classroom 5B, careful not to draw attention to himself. He was 10 minutes late again after having to make his own breakfast and lunch. His mother Carmen already gone for her early shift at the hospital cafeteria. Miguel slid into his seat at the back of the room, head down as Mrs. Martinez continued her science lesson without acknowledging his arrival. As I was saying, class, next month's science fair is a big opportunity, she announced with enthusiasm. The winning project will represent our school at the district competition, and this year we have a special guest judge, Dr. Linda Chen from Parkside University. A ripple of excitement moved through the classroom, but Miguel remained still, watching and listening as he always did from the periphery of the action, his worn sneakers tucked beneath his chair, his second-hand clothes making him feel invisible in a way that was both comforting and painful. "My dad can help me build a robot," announced Liam White, the tallest boy in class, whose father worked at the research lab downtown. "He has access to all kinds of cool tech. My parents already ordered a solar system model kit," added Sophia Miller, her designer backpack casually hanging off her chair. "It has real moving parts and lights up." Mrs. Martinez beamed at them. "Those sound like wonderful ideas. Remember, the key to success is parental involvement. So, make sure your families are on board." Miguel's heart sank at these words. His mother barely had time to sleep between her 2 jobs, let alone help with a science project. He glanced down at his notebook where he'd been sketching ideas during lunch. Breaks for weeks now, ever since the science fair had been first mentioned in the school newsletter. "Now let's continue with our lesson on ecosystems," Mrs. Martinez said, turning to the whiteboard. "Who can tell me how pollution affects our water systems?" Miguel's hand half raised, then lowered again as the teacher called on the usual participants, the same 5 or 6 students who always dominated class discussions. He knew the answer, had read about water pollution extensively during his visits to the public library, but speaking up in class meant drawing attention, and attention often led to comments about his accent, his clothes, or the free lunch card he tried to hide from view. When the bell rang for recess, Miguel remained in his seat, finishing the notes others had abandoned in their rush to the playground from the window. He could see Liam and his friends already organizing a soccer game, excluding the smaller kids. As usual, Miguel didn't mind. He preferred this quiet time. "To think, aren't you going outside, Miguel?" Mrs. Martinez asked finally, noticing him as she organized papers at her desk. "I'm finishing the notes, miss," he replied softly. She nodded absently, already turning her attention to her computer. "Just don't stay too long alone in the classroom." Miguel turned to a fresh page in his notebook and began sketching an idea that had been forming in his mind for weeks. Ever since he'd seen the murky water in Baker's Creek behind their apartment complex, where younger kids sometimes played despite warnings about pollution, His design was simple at first, just layers of different materials stacked inside a plastic bottle. But with each iteration, it grew more complex, more thoughtful. When the other students returned rowdy and red-faced from their games, Miguel carefully tucked his notebook away and became invisible again, a skill he had perfected over 2 years at Washington Elementary, since his family had moved from El Salvador for his mother's work. Opportunities, a move that had promised much but delivered little, except longer hours and smaller paychecks than she had anticipated. The afternoon dragged on with Miguel answering questions only when directly called upon, which was rare most teachers. Having learned that pulling him into discussions often resulted in awkward silences or barely audible responses, what they didn't realize was that behind his silence lay a mind constantly working, observing, analyzing, and problem-solving at 3 o'clock. When the final bell rang, Miguel packed his worn backpack, carefully tucking his precious notebook between textbooks to prevent bending the pages, while other students rushed toward waiting cars or the bus line. He began his solitary walk. Home, a journey that would take him past Baker's Creek, through the community park, and finally to the Sunrise Apartments, a subsidized housing complex where he and his mother occupied a one-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor. At the creek, Miguel paused. As he did most days, observing the oily film on the water's surface, the discarded plastic bottles caught among the reeds, the occasional flash of small fish somehow surviving. Despite the pollution, this place had become his unofficial laboratory, where he could observe environmental problems firsthand without the intimidating structure of classroom science. He knelt by the water's edge, careful not to touch the contaminated liquid, and pulled out his notebook, adding details to his sketches. Notes about filtration types, materials he might be able to salvage from recycling bins, a list of questions to research during his next library visit. "What you doing there, kid?" A gruff voice startled him. Miguel turned to see Mr. Ramirez, the groundskeeper, for the park, watching him suspiciously. "Just looking at the water, sir, for science class," he answered quickly. Closing his notebook, the man's expression softened. Studying, are you? Good. Good, too many kids just throw more trash in there," he gestured. "To the creek used to be clean enough to swim in when I was your age." "Really?" Miguel couldn't imagine the creek ever being clear enough for swimming. Mr. Ramirez nodded. "Before the factories upstream, before all this." He waved vaguely at the surrounding development. "Nature has a way of cleaning water, filtering it through soil and rocks. But we've overwhelmed the system, too much garbage, too many chemicals." Miguel considered this. "Could we help it? Clean it somehow?" The older man shrugged. "Big problem, kid, needs big solutions, big money government action. You know how it is," he continued on his rounds, leaving Miguel staring thoughtfully at the water. That evening in their small apartment, Miguel sat at the kitchen table, homework completed, working on his science fair idea while waiting for his mother to return from her evening job at the convenience store. Dinner was a sandwich he'd made himself, eaten quickly between math problems and sketching. The apartment was quiet except for the occasional sounds from neighboring units, a baby crying at television. Too loud, an argument quickly hushed. Miguel was used to the solitude, had learned to fill it with books, ideas, and his own imagination when the key finally turned in the lock. At 9:30, he looked up eagerly. "Mama," he greeted, as Carmen Rodriguez entered her uniform, rumpled her eyes, tired, but her smile genuine when she saw him. "Miguel, mi amor, still awake?" she asked in Spanish, dropping her purse and keys on the counter. "You should be in bed already." "I wanted to show you something," he said, switching to Spanish, as he always did at home, pulling out his notebook. "We're having a science fair at school, and I have an idea for a project." Carmen sat beside him, rubbing her feet after hours of standing. "Show me then, but quickly, it's late." Miguel carefully explained his concept for a water filtration system made from recycled materials, his words tumbling out with unusual animation as he described how it could help communities without access to clean water, how he could build it. From things people threw away, how it connected to their own experiences back home. where his cousin had gotten sick from contaminated water. Carmen listened, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten as she watched her son's eyes light up with passion for his project. "It sounds wonderful, Miguel, truly," she said when he finished. "Very smart, like you always are. So you can help me build it?" he asked hopefully. His mother's expression fell. "Oh, mijo, you know I would if I could, but with both jobs and the extra shifts they're asking me to take." She touched his cheek gently. "Can't you ask your teacher for help?" Miguel shook his head quickly. "No, it's okay, I can do it myself. I just thought." He began packing up his notebook. "It's not important." "It is important," Carmen insisted. "And you are so capable, Miguel, so intelligent. You don't need me for this. You'll make something amazing. I know it." Later that night, as Miguel lay in bed on the pull-out couch that served as his bedroom, he stared at the ceiling thinking about the science. Fair, his project, and the creek. He remembered his father's words from long ago before he had left them. "Use what you have, Miguel, not what you wish for." Tomorrow, he would begin collecting materials tomorrow. His idea would start becoming reality. He would show everyone what he could do, even if no one was watching. Even if no one noticed, he would build something that mattered. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright. The perfect day for Miguel's mission. The community recycling center opened at 8, and he was determined to be first in line, his faded blue backpack empty and ready to be filled with treasures others had discarded. He had spent the past week researching water filtration systems, reading everything he could find on the subject during his daily visits to the Pinewood Public Library. The recycling center was a 10-minute walk from the Sunrise Apartments, a sprawling facility where neighborhood residents dropped off sorted recyclables. Miguel had visited before with his mother, but never alone. The attendant, a middle-aged man with a weathered face, barely glanced at him as he entered. "Just looking for some plastic bottles and containers for a school project, sir," Miguel explained softly when the man finally noticed him lingering near the sorting area. "Help yourself, kid." The attendant shrugged. "Just don't make a mess. Stuff in those blue bins might be what you're looking for." Miguel nodded gratefully, making his way to the designated area where clear plastic bottles of various sizes were stacked haphazardly. He selected, carefully examining each one for cracks or damage, setting aside those with the widest mouths and sturdiest construction. His research had shown that multiple filtration layers would work best. Sand-activated charcoal, cotton, even coffee filters arranged in descending order of particle size as his backpack filled. With potential project materials, Miguel spotted something unexpected in another bin. Several mesh produce bags, discarded but still intact. He grabbed these too, remembering an article about how fine mesh could help trap smaller particles, a key component he hadn't figured out how to source yet. By the time he left an hour later, his backpack was bulging with plastic bottles, mesh bags, and even a few small plastic containers with lids that might serve as testing vessels for his filtered water. He had spent exactly $0, an important consideration, given that his weekly allowance of $3 needed to stretch for school supplies and occasional treats. The next stop on Miguel's Saturday journey was the public library, a 2-story brick building that had become his sanctuary over the past 2 years. Mrs. Patel, the children's librarian, greeted him with a warm smile as he entered. "Back again, Miguel. Beautiful day to be outside yet. Here you are." He smiled shyly. "I need to do more research for my science project, Mrs. Patel. Can I use the computer again?" 30 minutes on computer 3, she said, handing him a laminated time card. "It's all yours until then. It's quiet today." The library computers were ancient by most standards, but to Miguel, they were portals to knowledge he couldn't access. Otherwise, he navigated immediately to educational websites and scientific journals, typing "homemade water filtration effectiveness" into the search bar with careful precision as articles, and diagrams filled the screen. Miguel pulled out his notebook, recording important information with meticulous handwriting, testing methods, materials to avoid common problems others had encountered. He was so absorbed in his research that he didn't notice Mrs. Patel approaching until she spoke. "Water filtration?" she asked, glancing at his screen. "That's quite an advanced topic for a fifth grader." Miguel tensed, slightly worried she might suggest something simpler. "It's for the science fair. We're supposed to solve a real problem." Mrs. Patel nodded thoughtfully. "Well, you've certainly chosen a significant one. Many communities still lack access to clean water." She hesitated, then added, "You know, we just received a donation of science books from the university. Some might have information on this topic. Would you like to see them?" Miguel's eyes widened. "Yes, please." She led him to a cart of books not yet shelved, pointing out several titles on environmental engineering and water purification. These might be a bit advanced, but the diagrams could be helpful, and this one, she pulled out a slim volume with a blue cover, is specifically about low-cost water solutions for developing countries. Miguel accepted the books with reverence. "Thank you, Mrs. Patel." "You're welcome, Miguel." She smiled kindly. "May I ask what inspired this particular project? Most kids your age choose volcanoes or simple circuits." He looked down at his worn sneakers, considering how much to share. "My cousin Alberto back in El Salvador, he got very sick from the water there when I was 7. We had to boil everything, but not everyone remembers or has fuel." "Lord!" He trailed off, understanding flickered across Mrs. Patel's face. "That's a powerful motivation, Miguel, and a worthy challenge." She hesitated, then added, "If you need help finding more resources or understanding difficult concepts, please ask me. That's what librarians are for." Miguel nodded gratefully, retreating to a quiet table in the corner where he spread out his books and notebook. For the next 2 hours he read, sketched, and planned, occasionally returning to the computer for additional information. By lunchtime, his initial concept had evolved significantly, from a simple stacked filter to a more sophisticated system with multiple stages each targeting different contaminants as Miguel packed up his materials. Preparing to leave, Mrs. Patel approached. "Again, before you go, Miguel, I have something that might help." She handed him a printed article. "It's about activated charcoal, how it works in filtration and some safe ways to create it at home." "Create it?" Miguel asked, surprised. "I thought Iba would have to buy it." Mrs. Patel smiled. "That's the beauty of appropriate technology solutions, using what's available locally rather than depending on expensive imported materials. Read this, it might give you some ideas." On the walk home, Miguel's mind raced with possibilities. The books and articles had revealed filtration was far more complex than he had initially imagined, but also more fascinating. Particles of different sizes required different approaches, chemicals, and biological contaminants. Each presented unique challenges, but simple materials arranged correctly could address many of them at his apartment. Miguel emptied his backpack, carefully organizing his collected materials on the small balcony that served as their laundry area. And his unofficial laboratory space. His mother wouldn't be home until evening, giving him hours to begin experimenting with design. She started by cutting the bottom off a large soda bottle, creating a funnel shape, then prepared various filtering materials from items he'd collected or found around the apartment, cotton balls from the bathroom, a small bag of sand from the park playground, crushed charcoal from their last cookout. At the community grills, small pebbles gathered from the landscaping. Around the complex, his first test was simple, running tap water mixed with dirt through the layers, and observing what emerged at the bottom. The results were encouraging but not perfect. The water looked clearer but not entirely clean. Miguel made notes, adjusted the order and thickness of layers, then tested again. He was so engrossed in his work that he didn't hear the apartment door open, didn't realize his mother had returned from her morning shift until she spoke from the doorway. "What is all this, Miguel?" Carmen asked, surveying the collection of bottles, containers, and materials spread across their small balcony. He jumped slightly, then turned to her, excitement overcoming his usual reserve. "Mama, look, I'm building my filtration. System, see? The water goes in, here passes through these layers and comes out cleaner here. Carmen approached, examining his creation with genuine interest. You made this yourself? From these things? She gestured to the assortment of recycled items. Miguel nodded proudly. Everything was free, just things people threw away. Or I found I have more ideas too, like using mesh bags to hold the filtering materials so they don't mix together. And maybe even a charcoal layer that I can make myself, Carmen touched his shoulder, her eyes soft with a mixture of pride. And something else, something that might have been sadness. You're so much like your father, Miguel, always building, always solving problems. The mention of his father rare in their household caused Miguel to still his hands hovering over his project. Do you think he would like it? Carmen was quiet for a moment. He would be amazed. Mijo, truly amazed. She straightened up, checking her watch. I have 2 hours before my next shift. Would you like me to help you? I can't build things, but I can follow directions. Miguel's face lit up with a smile that transformed his usually serious expression. Yes, please. I need to test different combinations of materials. Can you help me record the results? For the next hour, mother and son worked together, Miguel explaining his research and plans, Carmen asking questions and writing down observations in his notebook. It wasn't the elaborate parent-child science project that his classmates would have, but in that moment, it felt perfect. His idea taking root, strengthened by his mother's simple presence and belief in him. The weeks leading up to the science fair took on a rhythm that defined Miguel's days. Early mornings spent collecting more materials from dumpsters and recycling bins behind local businesses. Afternoons dedicated to experiments and refinements. Evenings filled with research and adjustments to his design. His filtration system evolved through constant testing and iteration, each failure teaching him something new, each success propelling him forward. You're looking for what? Mr. Chen, the owner of Lucky Garden Restaurant, asked when he found Miguel behind his establishment one Tuesday morning. Activated charcoal, sir. Miguel explained nervously. For my science project, my research says restaurant supply stores sometimes have it for water filters. Mr. Chen studied the small boy with curious eyes. Science project, huh? About water? When Miguel nodded, he disappeared inside, returning moments later with a small bag. We use this for our filtration system, just replaced it last week. This old stuff no good for restaurant, but maybe good for Project Miguel. Accepted the bag with wide eyes. Thank you, sir, thank you so much. Good luck, little scientist, Mr. Chen called as Miguel hurried away. The unexpected donation clutched carefully. Against his chest at school, the science fair dominated conversations. As the deadline approached, corridors buzzed with discussions of projects, parents being recruited, techniques being refined. Miguel listened quietly, noting which approaches seemed most impressive to teachers, which projects received the most attention. My dad ordered special parts from Germany, Liam announced during lunch, his voice carrying across the cafeteria. Our robot will have facial recognition and everything. That's nothing, countered Sophia. My parents hired a college student to help design my solar system model. It'll show the actual orbital patterns with computer simulation. Miguel ate his free lunch in silence, focusing on his sandwich rather than the boasting. Happening around him, his project's latest challenge involved finding the right balance of filtration materials. Too much sand clogged the system. Too little charcoal reduced effectiveness. He mentally adjusted his design as he ate, oblivious to the high conversation until he heard his name. What about you, Rodriguez? Liam's voice cut through his thoughts. Let me guess, your project is what? A paper airplane? Snickers rippled through the nearby tables. Miguel looked up briefly. It's a water filter, he said quietly. A water filter? Liam repeated with exaggerated surprise. Wow, how exciting is it? Made from trash, like those bottles we see you digging for. More laughter followed Miguel's cheeks. Burned, but he kept his expression neutral. Years of similar encounters had taught him to show nothing. Yes, actually it is. Well, good luck with that. Liam smirked, turning back to his friends. "I'm sure the judges will be super impressed by your garbage project." The word stung, but also strengthened Miguel's resolve, reminding him of his father's voice from years ago after a particularly difficult day at their old school in El Salvador. People who mock what they don't understand. Miguel are afraid of being shown their own limitations. Your job is not to fight them, but to prove them wrong through your actions. That evening, Miguel sat at their small kitchen table refining his filtration design. The latest prototype spread before him, his notebook open to a page of careful measurements and observations. Carmen watched from the doorway, her expression a mixture of pride and concern. "Miguel, it's almost 10 o'clock. You should sleep," she said softly. He looked up startled to realize how late it had gotten. "Just one more test, Mama, please?" "I think I found the right combination," Carmen sighed, moving to sit beside him. "What is this new idea that cannot wait until tomorrow?" Miguel pointed to his diagram. "See, I've been trying to filter out bacteria, but the materials I have can't do it completely." Then I remembered something from the book Mrs. Patel gave me about using sunlight to kill harmful microorganisms. If I add a clear chamber here at the end where the filtered water sits in direct sunlight for a few hours, it could eliminate more contaminants. Carmen studied the design. "Clever, mijo, very clever. But the science fair is in 3 weeks. Will you have time to test this properly?" Miguel nodded determinedly. "I'll make time, get up earlier, stay up later." Carmen's voice grew serious. "You're already working so hard on this. Remember what happened to your father? Always pushing, always one more test, one more improvement, until—" She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. Miguel remembered all too well how his father's obsession with his engineering work had eventually contributed to the depression that drove him away from their family, the late nights, the missed meals, the distance that grew between him and the world around him. "It's different, Mama," Miguel said quietly. "I'm not forgetting to live, I'm learning how to solve problems that matter." Carmen studied her son's face, seeing both the child he was and the man he might become. "Promise me you'll rest. Promise me this project won't become more important than your health." "I promise," Miguel agreed, reaching for her hand. "And Mama, thank you for understanding." The following week brought a new challenge. When Mrs. Martinez announced that preliminary project presentations would take place the next day, giving students an opportunity to receive feedback before the actual science fair, Miguel had planned to keep his project secret until the final event, avoiding the inevitable comparisons and potential mockery. Now he had no choice but to reveal his work in progress. That night he carefully packed his prototype, wrapping the connected bottles in a towel for protection, along with his notebook and a small vial of murky water collected from Baker's Creek for demonstration purposes, his stomach tight with anxiety. "You have 5 minutes each to present your project concept and current progress," Mrs. Martinez explained the next morning as students set up their displays around the classroom. "This is just practice for the real science fair. So don't worry if everything isn't perfect yet." Miguel watched from his desk as classmates presented, one after another, Liam's robot, although not yet functional. Drew impressed gasps from the class when he showed the sophisticated components his father had procured. Sophia's planetary model, with its computer-generated simulation, received enthusiastic praise from Mrs. Martinez, who called it university-level work. When Miguel's turn came, he carried his wrapped project to the front of the room, carefully unveiling the connected series of plastic bottles, mesh bags, and containers that formed his filtration system. "This is a multi-stage water purification system made from recycled materials." He began, his voice so quiet that Mrs. Martinez had to ask him to speak up. "It's designed to clean contaminated water using materials that can be found almost anywhere, making it accessible to communities without resources for expensive filtration." A snicker came from somewhere in the class. Miguel's cheeks burned, but he continued, showing how dirty water poured into the top container, passed through layers of progressively finer filtration materials, and emerged clearer in the bottom container. "It's not perfect yet," he admitted, "but each layer removes different contaminants. First, larger particles like sticks and debris, then sand traps, smaller sediments activated. Charcoal absorbs many chemicals and improves taste. Cotton and coffee filters remove the finest particles, and the clear container at the bottom allows sunlight to kill some harmful bacteria, he demonstrated by pouring his sample of creek water through the system. The transformation from murky brown to relatively clear water was visible enough to quiet the snickering momentarily. "Where did you get the materials?" Mrs. Martinez asked, examining the setup with surprised interest. "Recycling bins. Dumpsters the park," Miguel answered. "Honestly, everything was free or donated, so it's literally made from trash," Liam called out, causing renewed laughter. Mrs. Martinez frowned. "That's enough, Liam." She turned back to Miguel. "It's a creative approach, Miguel, but I'm concerned about the scientific rigor. How do you know it actually makes the water safe? Have you tested it properly?" Miguel's confidence faltered. I can't test for bacteria without special equipment, but my research shows these methods remove many contaminants, not all but many, especially in places where the alternative is drinking directly from contaminated sources." Interesting concept. Mrs. Martinez concluded her tone, suggesting she found it more peculiar than promising. "Perhaps focus on the measurable improvements. Scientific data will be important for the judges." As Miguel packed up his project, amid whispers and poorly concealed laughter, he felt a familiar sinking feeling, the same one he'd experienced countless times when his efforts went unrecognized or undervalued. Yet beneath the disappointment, something else burned, a quiet determination that had carried him through. Challenges far greater than a classroom presentation. "Hey, garbage boy," Liam called as Miguel headed back to his seat. "When your trash filter wins, you can use the prize money to buy a real project." Miguel said nothing, but in his mind, he heard his father's voice again, clear as if he were standing beside him. "No pierdas tiempo peleando con los que no pueden ver tu valor. Miguel, your job is not to convince them, but to continue building until they cannot ignore what you've created that afternoon." As Miguel walked home, his project carefully rewrapped in his backpack, he made a decision. The mockery, the dismissal, the low expectations would not define his work or its worth. He would build something so effective, so clearly valuable, that even those determined to overlook him would be forced to see. 2 weeks before the science fair, Principal Warren announced that local news would be covering the event. Channel 5 News has selected our school for their Education Spotlight segment, he explained during morning announcements. They're particularly interested in our emphasis on STEM projects this year, so make sure your displays are camera ready. This announcement sent a wave of excitement through Washington elementary students discussing how to dress for television, parents calling in with additional resources to improve projects, teachers scheduling extra preparation sessions after school. The science fair had suddenly transformed from a school event to a community showcase with real stakes for Miguel. The news coverage meant nothing and everything. Nothing because he knew cameras would focus on flashy projects with well-spoken presenters, not on quiet boys with recycled materials. Everything because deep down, he still harbored a tiny hope that given the chance, his work might be recognized for what it truly was, a practical solution to a real-world problem at lunch. The following day, Mrs. Martinez stopped by Miguel's isolated corner of the cafeteria table where he sat sketching improvements to his filtration system. "Miguel, I wanted to speak with you about your science fair project." He looked up warily. "Yes, miss. I've been thinking about your presentation last week," she said, sitting beside him, "and I wonder if perhaps you might want to consider a different approach. Something more conventional. There's still time to switch to a simpler project, perhaps a volcano or battery circuit." Miguel's hand stilled on his notebook. "You think I should quit?" Mrs. Martinez's expression was kind but patronizing. "Not quit, Miguel. Just choose something more appropriate for your resources, something with more visual appeal. For the cameras, I'm concerned your current project might not show well, especially compared to some of the others." The suggestion stung worse than Liam's mockery because it came wrapped in the guise of helpfulness, an adult with authority, essentially telling him his work wasn't good enough, wasn't worth continuing. "Thank you for your concern, miss," Miguel said quietly, closing his notebook. "But I want to stay with my water filter," Mrs. Martinez sighed. "I understand it can be difficult to let go of an idea, but sometimes we need to be realistic about our limitations. I just don't want you to be disappointed." After she left, Miguel sat motionless, staring at his closed notebook, his appetite gone, his earlier determination wavering. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps he was fooling himself, thinking his homemade filter could compete with computer simulations and robots with facial recognition. Perhaps he should accept his limitations. The thought sat like a stone in his stomach throughout afternoon classes, following him home where he mechanically completed homework. Before pulling out his project materials, spreading them across the kitchen table, he stared at the assembled bottles filters and containers, the product of weeks of research, testing, and refinement. It looked exactly like what it was, a creation born of necessity, built from discarded items. Yet in its crude appearance lay something Mrs. Martinez had missed, something Miguel himself sometimes forgot purpose. He remembered his cousin Alberto's fevered face after drinking contaminated water, remembered the hospital too expensive for proper treatment, remembered his father boiling water each morning before school, a luxury of time and fuel many families couldn't afford in their community. He remembered the articles he'd read about millions of people worldwide without access to clean water, not because filtration was impossible, but because solutions were too expensive, too complex, too dependent on infrastructure that didn't exist. Miguel's hands moved to his project, touching each component, recalling its purpose, the problem it solved, the research behind its inclusion. Gradually, his resolve returned strengthened by the memory of why he had started this project in the first place, not for recognition, not for prizes, but because clean water mattered, because problems weren't solved by wishing for different resources, but by using what was available. The following Saturday, Miguel visited the public library earlier than usual, arriving just as Mrs. Patel unlocked the doors. "You're my first customer today." She smiled. "Science project still going strong?" He nodded. "Mrs. Patel, can you help me find information about testing water quality? My teacher says I need more scientific data." The librarian considered this. Water testing usually requires special equipment, but let me think." She led him to the reference section, pulling out several books. Basic tests for turbidity, that's cloudiness, and some contaminants can be done with household items. "Let's see what we can find." For the next hour, they searched together through books and online resources until they discovered several simple tests Miguel could perform to measure his filter's effectiveness. Mrs. Patel printed articles explaining how to document water clarity before and after filtration, how to test for chlorine using test strips available at pool supply stores, how to measure sedimentation rates. "This is perfect," Miguel said, studying the information. "Now I can show exactly what my filter does and doesn't do with real measurements. Science is about honest assessment." Miguel, Mrs. Patel reminded him, documenting limitations is as important as celebrating successes. A good scientist acknowledges both. Armed with this guidance, Miguel spent the next week developing a testing protocol for his filter, collecting water samples from different sources, documenting conditions before and after filtration, creating simple charts to display his results. He even managed to save enough from his allowance to purchase basic pool testing strips from the hardware store, allowing him to measure changes in chemical composition. His mother noticed the shift in his approach. "You seem different, mijo, more." She searched for the word confident. Miguel looked up from where he was carefully recording test results. "I decided something, Mama. I decided to stop worrying about what others think and focus on making my project as good as it can be with What I have, if it's not fancy enough, that's okay, as long as it works. Carmen's eyes softened with pride. That is exactly right, Miguel, exactly right. As the science fair drew closer, competition among the students intensified. Corridor conversations revolved around last-minute improvements, secret features being added, judging criteria, speculation about who might win. Liam and Sophia, the front-runners according to most, continued to receive special attention from teachers who helped refine their presentations, offered extra materials, ensured they were prepared for judges' questions. Miguel worked alone, as always, staying late after school in the classroom corner when others had gone home, Mrs. Martinez allowing him the space, though rarely. Checking his progress, he had added a testing component to his display, creating before and after samples of filtered water alongside charts, documenting measurable improvements in clarity, sediment reduction, and rudimentary chemical testing. 3 days before the fair, Principal Warren visited classrooms to review projects, offering suggestions and encouragement to students. He paused at each desk, commenting positively regardless of the project's sophistication. When he reached Miguel, he studied the filtration system with genuine curiosity. Explain how this works, son. He requested Miguel walk through each stage of the filtration process, explaining the purpose of each material, how they work together to progressively clean the waters. Showing his testing results with unexpected confidence, born from truly understanding his creation. Principal Warren nodded thoughtfully. You know what impresses me about this, Miguel? It solves a real problem with accessible materials that's practical. Science, not just demonstration. He patted Miguel's shoulder. Good work. The brief interaction lasted less than 3 minutes, but its impact on Miguel was profound. An authority figure had seen value in his project, had recognized its purpose without qualification or condescension. The validation wasn't about winning or recognition, but about confirmation that his approach, the very one Mrs. Martinez had suggested abandoning, had merit after all that afternoon. As Miguel packed up his project, careful to keep the testing samples separate from the filter components, Liam approached with 2 friends flanking him. Hey, Rodriguez, heard the principal actually liked your trash project. Must have felt sorry for you. Miguel continued packing, focusing on securing his materials properly. He understood what it's for, that's all. What it's for? Liam laughed. It's for people who can't afford real filters, right? People like you? The words were designed to hurt, to remind Miguel of his place in the social hierarchy of Washington Elementary. But something had shifted in him, a newfound certainty that transcended schoolyard taunts. Yes, Liam, exactly. It's for people who need solutions, not decorations. The unexpected response left Liam momentarily speechless, and Miguel took the opportunity to finish packing his backpack and leave the classroom, head held higher than usual. The science fair was 2 days away, and for the first time since it had been announced, he found himself looking forward to it, not with anxiety but with purpose. His project might not win, might not attract cameras or praise, but it would stand for something real, something necessary, and that knowledge alone made it worthwhile. The evening before the science fair, Miguel stayed late at school, making final adjustments to his display. With Principal Warren's permission, Carmen couldn't pick him up until after her evening shift ended at 9, giving Miguel nearly 4 hours of uninterrupted work time in the empty classroom. Mrs. Martinez had reluctantly provided the key, extracting a promise that he would lock up properly when finished. The classroom felt different after hours, the usual chatter and movement replaced by silence and stillness. Miguel spread his materials across his assigned desk area, arranging his poster board with carefully handwritten information about water contamination, global access issues, and his filtration design. His water samples displayed in clear containers showing the before and after effects, his testing charts laminated, using the school library's machine to protect them from potential spills. As he worked, Miguel talked to himself quietly. a habit from long hours spent alone. The sand layer needs to be 3 centimeters thick for optimal filtration. The activated charcoal should be placed after nut, before otherwise it clogs too quickly. Talking to yourself is the first sign of genius, or so they say. Miguel jumped, nearly knocking over a water sample, the unexpected voice coming from the classroom doorway. A tall man in gray coveralls stood watching him, a cleaning cart visible in the hallway behind him. "Sorry, kid, didn't mean to scare you," the man said, entering the room. "I'm Mr. Jackson's school custodian, just starting my evening rounds. I have permission to be here," Miguel said quickly. Principal Warren said, "I know," Mr. Jackson nodded, approaching Miguel's desk. "Warren told me you'd be working late, asked me to check on you, make sure you're doing okay." He studied the filtration system with interest. "So, what's this contraption?" Miguel hesitated, unfamiliar with adult interest in his work. "It's a water filtration system made from recycled materials." "No." "Kidding?" Mr. Jackson leaned closer, examining the connected bottles. "Mind explaining how it works?" To Miguel's surprise, he found himself walking the custodian through his design, explaining each component's purpose, the research behind his choices. The testing he'd conducted, Mr. Jackson listened with unusual attentiveness, asking informed questions that suggested more than casual curiosity. "This activated charcoal layer," he pointed, "you using straight charcoal or did you treat it?" Miguel looked up, startled by the technical question. I couldn't treat it properly. I read about using salt solutions to increase absorption, but I didn't have the right materials." Mr. Jackson nodded thoughtfully. "That would improve it, especially for chemical contaminants. But you've got a good, basic setup here, considering your resources." He straightened up. "Where'd you learn about water filtration anyway?" "Not exactly standard 5th grade curriculum." Miguel explained briefly about his cousin's illness in El Salvador, his research at the library, the articles and books that had informed his design. As he spoke, Mr. Jackson's expression grew increasingly interested. "You know something about this, sir?" Miguel asked. Noticing the man's knowledgeable responses, Mr. Jackson smiled slightly. "You could say that I was a water purification specialist in the Army Corps of Engineers for 12 years before I started working here?" Miguel's eyes widened. "You're an engineer?" was Mr. Jackson corrected. "Now I'm a custodian. But yes, I specialized in setting up emergency water systems in disaster areas and developing countries' designed filtration systems. Not too different from what you're doing here, though, on a larger scale. Could you?" Miguel hesitated, then continued, "Would you look at my design? Tell me what I'm doing wrong." Mr. Jackson checked his watch. "Got about 30 minutes before I need to start buffing the hallway floors." "Sure, I'll take a look." What followed was the most valuable 30 minutes of Miguel's science fair preparation. Mr. Jackson examined each component of the filtration system, testing connections, suggesting adjustments, explaining principles Miguel had intuited but not fully understood. "Your instincts were good with the layering," he commented, rearranging the order slightly, "but sediment should always come out first before the finer filtration. Otherwise you clog your good materials too quickly. And here," he pointed to Miguel's final container, "if you're using the solarization method for bacterial reduction, you need at least 6 hours of direct sunlight with clear containers, preferably glass. But clear plastic works in a pinch." Miguel took frantic notes in his notebook, trying to capture every suggestion. "This is amazing, Mr. Jackson, thank you." The custodian waved off his thanks. "It's nice to use the old knowledge. Once in a while, been a while since anyone asked for my opinion on water systems." "Why did you stop being an engineer?" Miguel asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. "Sorry, I shouldn't." "It's fine," Mr. Jackson interrupted. "Short version? Came back from my last deployment with some issues." He tapped his temple. "Up here, couldn't focus on complex calculations anymore, couldn't handle the pressure of lives depending on my designs. Custodial work is straightforward. Physical gives me time to think without demands for perfection." Miguel nodded, understanding more than might be expected from a 10-year-old. "My father was an engineer too, back in El Salvador. He couldn't handle the pressure either. Left when I was 7. Mr. Jackson studied Miguel with new understanding. "That's rough, kid. I'm sorry." They worked in companionable silence for several minutes, Mr. Jackson helping Miguel implement the suggested improvements to his system when the custodian's walkie-talkie crackled with a message from another staff member. He reluctantly stood. "Duty calls, got to clean the cafeteria before the hallways tonight," he said, moving toward the door, then paused. "You know what impresses me about your project, Miguel? It's not just that you built it with limited resources. Plenty of kids are resourceful. It's that you identified a real problem and created a practical solution that's engineering at its best," Miguel looked up from his adjustments. "That's what I wanted to do. Make something that actually helps people, not just looks impressive." "Mission accomplished, then," Mr. Jackson nodded approvingly. "Listen, I've got some materials in my workshop that might help improve your filter military-grade purification tablets that work on bacteria stuff. I kept from my service days. If you're interested, I could bring them tomorrow before the fair." Miguel's eyes widened. "That would be amazing, sir, but—" He hesitated. "Wouldn't that be cheating? Using materials I didn't find myself," Mr. Jackson considered this. "Engineers collaborate, Miguel. They use available resources, including expertise from others. The important thing is understanding how and why components work together, which you clearly do. This isn't a test of your scavenging skills. It's about creating the best solution you can within constraints." After Mr. Jackson left, continuing his cleaning rounds, Miguel sat thoughtfully at his desk. Considering the unexpected encounter, the custodian's words had reinforced something Miguel had felt but couldn't articulate. His project wasn't just about following assignment guidelines or competing with classmates. It was about solving a real problem using available resources, exactly what engineers did in the field. With renewed purpose, Miguel continued refining his display, incorporating Mr. Jackson's suggestions, improving his explanatory poster, adding more detailed information about bacterial contamination and methods to address it. When Carmen arrived at 9 to pick him up, she found her son unusually animated, explaining Mr. Jackson's suggestions and his plans to implement them. He was an engineer, Mama, a real engineer, who built water systems for people who needed them, just like I want to do. Carmen smiled at his enthusiasm. "See, mijo? Sometimes help comes from unexpected places. Sometimes the right person appears just when you need them." That night, Miguel slept soundly for the first time in weeks. His anxiety about the science fair replaced by anticipation. He still didn't expect to win, still knew his project wouldn't attract the attention that Liam's robot or Sophia's planetary simulation would receive. But now he had something perhaps more valuable: confirmation from someone with expertise that his work had real merit, practical application value beyond a school assignment. When he arrived at school the next morning earlier than usual, Mr. Jackson was waiting outside the classroom, a small box in his hands. "Thought you could use these," he said, handing Miguel the box. "Nothing fancy, just some purification tablets, testing strips, and a few filtration materials we used in the field." Miguel accepted the box with reverence. "Thank you, Mr. Jackson." "Really?" the custodian nodded. "Good luck today, kid. Remember, it doesn't matter what the judges think. What matters is that you've built something that works, something that solves a real problem. That's success regardless of ribbons or prizes." As Miguel entered the classroom to set up his project, he carried not just Mr. Jackson's materials, but also his perspective, the validation of a professional who understood the value of practical solutions, the knowledge that sometimes the quietest projects could have the loudest impact in the real world where it mattered most. Science Fair Day dawned bright and clear, a perfect May morning, as Miguel carefully wrapped his project components in old towels for safe transport to school. Unlike his classmates, who arrived with parents carrying elaborate displays, Miguel walked alone, his precious creation packed in his backpack and a tattered shopping bag. The materials he'd worked on for months nestled carefully between layers of protection. The school gymnasium had been transformed overnight into a science showcase. Long, Tables arranged in rows covered with blue tablecloths, student names taped to assigned positions, teachers and parent volunteers bustled about arranging chairs, setting up the judges' station, hanging a large welcome banner across the entrance. Miguel stood at the doorway, momentarily overwhelmed by the activity, before stepping inside to find his table 14 Rodriguez. A parent volunteer directed him, checking her clipboard without really looking at him. You have 45 minutes. For setup before judging begins, Miguel's assigned table was in the far corner of the gymnasium, away from the center where most parent and visitor traffic would naturally flow. He noticed with a sinking feeling that Liam's expansive robot display occupied a prime position near the entrance, while Sophia's planetary simulation stood impressively in the center of the room, highly visible from all angles. Still, he reminded himself, location wouldn't matter if his project worked well enough to draw attention on its own merits. Carefully, Miguel unpacked his materials, arranging his filtration system exactly as he and Mr. Jackson had designed it the night before. He positioned his before and after water samples, prominently displayed his testing, charts and results, and set up the explanatory poster he'd created with careful handwriting and hand-drawn diagrams, while around him other students' parents helped assemble complex displays, attached electronics, positioned, professionally printed. Materials need any help? Miguel looked up to find Mr. Jackson in his custodial uniform, pushing a wheeled trash bin through the gym, collecting discarded packaging materials. I'm good, thank you, he replied quietly, adding in a lower voice, I used the tablets you gave me. They worked really well, see? He pointed to a water sample labeled bacterial test, showing clear results from the purification process. Jackson nodded approvingly. Display looks professional, good. Clear information, that's what judges look for, not just flash. As setup continued, Miguel observed the contrast between his project and those around him. Liam's father, a tall man in an expensive suit, directed a small team setting up the facial recognition robot Sophia's. Mother arranged professional-looking planetary models, while a college student connected the computer simulation. Nearly every other student had at least one parent assisting, often bringing last-minute supplies, making adjustments, ensuring everything was perfect. Principal Warren moved through the gymnasium, greeting students examining projects. Offering encouragement when he reached Miguel's table, he paused, studying the filtration system with genuine interest. Impressive work, Miguel, you've made. Significant improvement since I last saw it. Thank you, sir, Miguel replied. I got some expert advice. The principal smiled. That's what good scientists do. They collaborate, they seek knowledge. He made a note on his clipboard. Good luck today at exactly 10 o'clock, Principal Warren called for attention, announcing the arrival of the judges. 3 professionals from outside the school, including the highly anticipated Dr. Linda Chen from Parkside University's Environmental Engineering Department. Miguel watched as the judges entered, a tall woman with short gray hair leading the group, followed by a younger man in a lab coat and an older gentleman carrying a digital tablet. Judges will evaluate each project independently, Principal Warren explained, spending approximately 5 minutes at each display. Students should remain at their stations, ready to explain their work, answer questions, and demonstrate functionality if applicable. Miguel's heart raced as he watched the judges begin. At the first row of tables, starting with Liam's robot project, a crowd of spectators forming behind them, parents, teachers, and students from other classes, all eager to see the most impressive displays. He knew it would be at least an hour before they reached his corner, giving him time to calm his nerves, review his explanation practice, his demonstration. He waited. Miguel observed how the judging unfolded. Liam's facial recognition demonstration, drawing gasps and applause. Sophia's planetary simulation earning extended discussion with Dr. Chen. The impressive technical projects receiving the most attention and time from the judges, despite the 5-minute guideline. Some stations keeping the judges engaged for nearly twice that long, gradually. The gymnasium filled with more visitors, community members, local officials, even a camera crew From Channel 5 setting up equipment near the entrance, Miguel noticed with dismay that they focused primarily on the front row projects, interviewing students with the most visually impressive displays, his corner of the gym remaining quiet, comparatively forgotten. "Don't worry about the cameras," Mr. Jackson murmured as he emptied a nearby trash can. "They're just looking for flashy 10-second clips for the evening news. Doesn't mean anything." Miguel nodded gratefully for the reassurance, though he couldn't help feeling invisible as he had so many times before. The quiet boy in the corner with the project made from recycled materials, hardly worth a second glance in a room full of technological marvels. Be 11:30. The judges had worked their way through half the projects, taking a brief break before continuing. Miguel used this time to make final adjustments to his display, ensuring that his water samples were positioned for maximum visibility, checking that his filtration system was properly connected for demonstration, when a small commotion near the entrance caught his attention. Carmen Rodriguez, still wearing her hospital cafeteria uniform, having obviously come directly from her morning shift, was speaking with the parent volunteer at the door, who seemed reluctant to let her enter. Miguel watched his mother's expression grow increasingly distressed as she pointed towards the far corner of the gym where he stood. Without thinking, Miguel hurried across the gymnasium. "Mama," he called. "She's with me. She's my mother." The volunteer looked between them skeptically. Parents were supposed to arrive during the designated setup. Period. "We're limiting disruptions during judging." "Please," Miguel said. "She had to work. She came as soon as she could." Principal Warren, who had overheard the exchange, approached. "It's fine. Maureen, let's make an exception." He smiled warmly at Carmen. "Welcome to our science fair, Mrs. Rodriguez. Your son has created quite an impressive project." Relief washed over Carmen's face as she was allowed to enter, Miguel leading her back to his table, explaining his display in rapid Spanish, her eyes filling with pride as she took in the complexity of his creation. "It's wonderful. Miguel, truly wonderful," she said, touching his shoulder. "I'm sorry I couldn't be here earlier to help you set up." "It's okay, Mama, you're here now. That's what matters," Miguel replied, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders, the presence of his mother somehow validating his work, making his corner of the gymnasium feel less isolated. When the judges resumed their rounds, Miguel watched their progression with increasing nervousness. They were now in his row, moving steadily closer to his table. Carmen stood slightly behind him, offering silent support as they approached. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the three judges arrived at Miguel's display. "Hello, young man," the older gentleman said, consulting his tablet. "Miguel Rodriguez, is it? Tell us about your project." Taking a deep breath, Miguel began his carefully rehearsed explanation. "This is a multi-stage water filtration system designed to provide clean drinking water using only recycled and locally available materials." He pointed to each component. "Contaminated water enters here, passing through progressively finer filtration materials to remove different types of impurities." As he spoke, Miguel demonstrated pouring a sample of murky water collected from Baker's Creek into the top container, allowing the judges to observe as it passed through each stage, emerging noticeably clearer at the bottom. "These are my testing results," he continued, pointing to his charts, showing reduction in turbidity, sediment, and some chemical contaminants. "I also tested for bacterial reduction using these indicators." He indicated the water samples treated with Mr. Jackson's purification tablets, showing significant improvement, though not complete purification. To Miguel's surprise, the judges didn't immediately move on. Instead, Dr. Chen leaned closer, examining the layers of his filtration system. "What materials are you using in each stage?" she asked, her voice sharp with interest. Encouraged, Miguel explained each component's purpose, the research behind his choices, the limitations he discovered through testing. The judges listened with unexpected attentiveness, asking technical questions that challenged his understanding, but which he answered with growing confidence, drawing on both his research and Mr. Jackson's guidance. "What inspired this project?" the younger judge asked, Most students your age choose more. Conventional topics. Miguel glanced briefly at his mother before answering. My cousin in El Salvador got very sick from contaminated water. When I was 7, many families there can't afford commercial filters or don't have fuel to boil water. Wanted to create something that could help people like them, something that actually solves a real problem using materials anyone can find. Lunch break was announced shortly after the judges completed their rounds. Students and visitors directed to the cafeteria, where the Parent-Teacher Association had prepared refreshments. Miguel and Carmen found a quiet table in the corner away from the excited chatter of other families. You must be hungry, Carmen said, pushing her sandwich toward Miguel. Take half I ate before my shift. Miguel shook his head. I'm too nervous to eat. Mama, did you see Dr. Chen testing my filter? Now why would she do that if it wasn't good enough? Carmen smiled. Because it was good enough, Miguel. That's exactly why she tested it. She wanted to see for herself, not just take your word for it. That's what scientists do. Before Miguel could respond, a shadow fell across their table. He looked up to see Dr. Chen standing there, clipboard in hand, expression unreadable. Miguel Rodriguez, might I have a word? Carmen immediately stood. Of course, doctor, I can step away if... Please stay, Mrs. Rodriguez, doctor. Chen gestured for Carmen to remain seated as she pulled up a chair, joining them at the small table. I wanted to ask Miguel a few follow-up questions about his filtration system, if that's all right. Miguel nodded nervously. Yes, ma'am, Dr. Chen placed her clipboard on the table. Your project interested me particularly, your approach to solving a practical problem with limited resources. She studied Miguel with keen eyes. How long have you been interested in water purification? Since I was 7, Miguel answered. When my cousin got sick from contaminated water in El Salvador, the doctor said it was bacterial, but the community couldn't afford proper filtration systems. And you researched this entirely on your own? Her tone suggested. She found this difficult to believe. Miguel hesitated, then answered honestly, mostly yes, through books and articles at the public library. But recently, Mr. Jackson, the school custodian, helped me. He used to be a water engineer in the Army. Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. I see, and these testing protocols you developed? I found information about basic water testing in environmental science books, Miguel explained, gaining confidence. As he discussed his research, Mrs. Patel, the librarian, helped me find resources about measuring turbidity, sediment, and bacterial contamination without specialized equipment. Dr. Chen made a note, then asked, your display mentioned limitations of your current design. What specifically would you change? If you could? Miguel's eyes lit up with the question. 3 main improvements. First, adding an ultraviolet purification stage for complete bacterial elimination. Second, incorporating specialized filtering media for heavy metals and chemical contaminants. Third, finding a way to increase flow rate without reducing effectiveness, maybe through a pressurized system. As he spoke, Miguel's usual shyness faded, replaced by the confidence that comes from true understanding. Dr. Chen nodded occasionally, asking technical questions that pushed his knowledge, testing the depth of his research. Miguel answered as best he could, acknowledging when he reached the limits of his understanding. One last question. Dr. Chen said finally, why recycled materials? Surely you could have created a more impressive display with new purchased components. Miguel glanced at his mother before answering. 2 reasons. First, practical application in places that need water filtration. Most people don't have access to specialty materials. They use what's available. Second, he hesitated, then continued honestly, I couldn't afford new materials. My mother works very hard, but we have limited resources, so I learned to work with what I could find. Carmen reached for Miguel's hand, squeezing it gently, pride and something like pain mingling in her expression. Dr. Chen observed this interaction, her professional demeanor softening slightly. Thank you for your candor, Miguel, she said, rising from the table. Your project shows remarkable initiative and practical problem solving, particularly for someone your age. After Dr. Chen left, Carmen embraced Miguel briefly. You spoke so well, mijo, so clearly about your work, Miguel shrugged, though he couldn't hide his pleased expression. It's easy to explain something when you understand it completely. When lunch concluded, everyone returned to the gymnasium where the judges had assembled at the front of the room. Principal Warren stepped to the microphone. Thank you all for your participation in this year's science fair. We've seen exceptional work today. Our judges have had the difficult task of evaluating many outstanding projects. Miguel stood beside his display, Carmen nearby as awards were announced, beginning with honorable mentions, then moving to subject-specific categories. Sophia Miller received recognition for best use of technology, her planetary simulation drawing appreciative applause. Liam White won most innovative design for his facial recognition robot, beaming as he accepted his certificate. And now, Principal Warren continued, our overall science fair winners who will represent Washington Elementary at the district competition next month. The gymnasium grew quiet with anticipation, Miguel already turning his attention to packing up his project, assuming the announcement wouldn't involve him. When Principal Warren's voice cut through his thoughts, third place goes to Jasmine Patel for her excellent work on agricultural pest management using beneficial insects. Polite applause followed as Jasmine, a sixth grader, accepted her bronze medal. Second place goes to Liam White for his facial recognition robot demonstrating principles of artificial intelligence and computer vision. Liam strode confidently to the front, accepting his silver medal with a practiced smile, though Miguel noticed his expression showed disappointment at not winning first place. And our first place winner, Principal Warren paused dramatically, whose project demonstrated exceptional scientific methodology, practical application, and innovative problem-solving, goes to. Miguel had already turned away, beginning to disassemble his filter, when he heard it, Miguel Rodriguez, for his multi-stage water filtration system using recycled materials. The gymnasium fell silent for a moment before applause began scattered. At first, then growing, Miguel stood frozen, unable to process what he'd heard, until Carmen gently pushed him forward. Go, mijo. They called your name, you won. Moving as if in a dream, Miguel made his way to the front of the gymnasium, aware of the surprised expressions around him, Liam's face a mask of disbelief, Sophia whispering urgently to her mother, the Channel 5 camera suddenly swinging in his direction as he approached Principal Warren. And the judges, congratulations, Miguel. Principal Warren said, handing him a gold medal and certificate, an exceptional achievement. Dr. Chen stepped forward, shaking his hand. Your project stood out for its practical application, solid scientific methodology, and potential real-world impact. Exactly what we look for in true scientific innovation. Miguel accepted the medal, his hands trembling slightly. Thank you, he managed to say, though the words seemed inadequate for the emotions swirling within him as he turned to face the audience, medal in hand. Miguel searched for his mother, finding her in the crowd, tears streaming down her face, applauding with unrestrained pride beside her. Somehow Mr. Jackson had appeared in his custodial uniform, clapping with dignified approval, their expressions anchoring him in the surreal moment. Back at his table, Miguel was surrounded by people who had previously walked past his display. Without a glance, teachers who had rarely called on him in class, students who had never invited him to join their games, parents who had never noticed him before, all suddenly interested in his recycled bottle filtration system. How did you come up with this idea? Can you explain how the charcoal layer works? Would this work for our camping trips? Miguel answered each question with growing confidence, the Channel 5 reporter positioning her cameraman for the best angle as she interviewed him. Tell us about your inspiration, Miguel, she prompted, microphone extended toward him, looking directly into the camera. Miguel spoke clearly. Clean water shouldn't be a luxury. It should be accessible to everyone, regardless of where they live or their economic situation. My project shows that effective solutions don't always require expensive materials. Sometimes They just require looking at problems differently using what's available. Across the gymnasium, Liam watched the scene unfolding around Miguel's previously ignored corner, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally grudging curiosity. The robot that had seemed so impressive an hour ago now sitting idle as visitors flocked to see the recycled bottle filtration system that had claimed first place. "I don't understand," Liam muttered to his father. "It's just plastic bottles and trash. How could that beat my robot?" His father watched the crowd around Miguel thoughtfully. "Because it solves a real problem, son, in a way that could actually help people. Sometimes that matters more than technical complexity, a lesson worth learning." As the excitement continued around him, Miguel felt a hand on his shoulder, turning to find Mr. Jackson standing there. "Told you, it doesn't matter what they think. What matters is building something that works," the custodian said quietly. "But it's nice." When they noticed, too, "Congratulations, Engineer Rodriguez." Miguel smiled at the title, feeling for the first time that perhaps it might someday be possible. "I couldn't have done it without your help," Mr. Jackson shook his head. "You had already done the hard part, figuring out what mattered and working toward it despite limited resources. That's the part that can't be taught, that comes from within." The days following the science fair transformed Miguel's life in ways he could never have anticipated. His interview with Channel 5 aired on the evening news. His earnest explanation of the filtration system and its potential applications resonating with viewers across the city. The school received calls from local environmental organizations, community leaders, and even a representative from the mayor's office, all interested in the fifth grader who had created a practical solution to water contamination using recycled materials. "Miguel, the principal wants to see you," Mrs. Martinez announced Monday morning. Her tone and demeanor notably different from before. The science fair victory gone, was the subtle dismissiveness replaced by something approaching respect. In Principal Warren's office, Miguel found not only the principal, but also Dr. Chen from Parkside University, and a man in a business suit he didn't recognize. "There he is, our science champion." Principal Warren greeted him warmly. "Miguel, I'd like you to meet Mr. Thomas, director of the city's Environmental Resources Department. He saw your interview on Channel 5 and wanted to meet you." Mr. Thomas extended his hand, which Miguel shook tentatively. "Impressive work, young man. Dr. Chen has been telling me about your filtration system and its potential applications for our community outreach programs." Miguel glanced at Dr. Chen, who nodded encouragingly. "I've discussed your project with my colleagues at the university's Environmental Engineering Department. We believe your approach has significant merit, particularly for educational purposes and emergency preparedness. We'd like to feature your design at the upcoming City Environmental Fair," Mr. Thomas explained. "Show people how they can create emergency water filtration using household materials. Would you be willing to demonstrate your system and perhaps help develop an instructional guide?" Miguel blinked, processing this unexpected request. "You want to use my design?" "With full credit to you, of course," Mr. Thomas assured him. "And we'd provide resources to help you refine and improve it, perhaps address some of those limitations you mentioned in your presentation." Principal Warren beamed with pride. "What an opportunity, Miguel. The environmental fair draws thousands of visitors from across the region." Miguel considered the proposal, his mind racing with possibilities, improvements. He could make refinements to the design with proper resources. "Yes," he said finally, "I'd like that very much." The meeting continued with discussion of logistics, timeframes, resources, the adults treating Miguel's input with genuine consideration, noting his suggestions, incorporating his ideas into their plans. By the time he returned to class, Miguel felt as though he had stepped into an alternate reality, one where his thoughts mattered, where his creativity was valued, where doors opened rather than closed. In the classroom, Miguel found his classmates. Attitudes had undergone a subtle shift, no longer entirely invisible. He received curious glances, tentative smiles. Even Liam approached during lunch. "So, Rodriguez, Liam began his tone, attempting casualness, though discomfort showed in his shifting stance. That filtration thing. How'd you come up with the idea anyway? Miguel considered ignoring him, remembering months of mockery and dismissal. But something in Liam's expression suggested genuine curiosity, rather than mockery. I wanted to solve a real problem, he answered simply. Clean water access affects millions of people worldwide, Liam nodded. Absorbing this, my dad said sometimes simple solutions are better than complex ones if they actually work. A grudging admission that suggested his father had used Miguel's victory as a teaching moment, different approaches for different problems. Miguel offered, "Your robot was impressive, Liam. The facial recognition coding must have been complicated." Surprise flickered across Liam's face. At the compliment, "Yeah, it was my dad helped a lot though." For the first time, a hint of insecurity appeared in his expression. "Did you really build your filter completely by yourself?" Miguel thought of Mr. Jackson's guidance, his mother's support, Mrs. Patel's research assistance. I had help finding information and some expert advice, but the design and construction, yes. That was me? Their conversation might have continued, but was interrupted by Sophia joining them. Miguel, Principal Warren, says you're going to be in the city environmental fair. That's amazing. Her enthusiasm seemed genuine, though tinged with something like envy. My parents were talking about your project all weekend. My dad says filtration systems like yours could be used in disaster relief. The conversation continued, a tentative bridge forming between Miguel and classmates who had previously ignored him. Not friendship exactly, but a recognition that transcended previous social boundaries. Miguel contributed to the discussion with growing confidence, his voice finding strength in this new terrain where his knowledge and creativity had proven their worth after school. Carmen waited at the gate, her face lighting up when she saw Miguel. "Mi amor, how was your day?" she asked in Spanish. Switching to English as other parents approached, Mrs. Rodriguez, Principal Warren, called, joining them. "Just the person I wanted to see. We need to discuss Miguel's participation in the district science competition and the city environmental fair. Some paperwork for you to sign permissions for him to work with the university engineering department." Carmen's expression shifted to confusion, then pride as Principal Warren explained the opportunities unfolding. For Miguel, her son, the science champion, her son whose project was being recognized by university professors and city officials, her son who had created something valuable from materials others had discarded. That evening, as they walked home, Miguel, carrying a folder of information about upcoming events, Carmen shook her head in wonderment. "If your father could see you now, Miguel, he would be so proud the way you've used his engineering mind." But with your own heart, Miguel considered this rare mention of his father. "Do you think he knows, Mama, about the science fair, about my project?" Carmen's expression softened. "I don't know, mijo. It's been 3 years since we received any word from him, but perhaps somehow. Yes, I think he would be." Proud regardless, at home, they found an unexpected package waiting at their apartment door. A box addressed to Miguel Rodriguez with Parkside University's logo stamped in the corner. Inside was a letter from Dr. Chen and a collection of books on environmental engineering, water purification systems, and sustainable design, along with a note explaining that the university's outreach program provided educational resources to promising young scientists. "Dr. Chen believes in you, Miguel," Carmen said as they examined the books together. "These are university-level texts." Miguel ran his fingers over the glossy covers, feeling possibilities expanding before him. She said, "My approach had merit, that it could help people." She recognized what I've always known, Carmen replied, "that you have a special mind and a good heart together. Those can change the world." The following days brought more changes, Mrs. Martinez asking Miguel to explain his filtration system to the class assigning him. As a peer tutor for the upcoming science unit students who had never spoken to him before, seeking his help with their projects, the school newspaper featuring an article about his victory with a photo of him demonstrating his filter most significant was the invitation to present his project at the district science competition, not merely as Washington Elementary's representative, but as a featured presenter in the Environmental Solutions category, the competition normally reserved for middle and high school students, making an exception for his exceptional work on Thursday afternoon as Miguel worked in the classroom after school, refining his design for the upcoming presentations. Mr. Jackson stopped by with cleaning supplies, heard about all your opportunities, the custodian said. City Fair District Competition University. Connections moving up in the world. Engineer Rodriguez. Miguel smiled at the nickname that had begun to feel less like a joke and more like a possibility. All because you helped me. Mr. Jackson, I wouldn't have won without your advice. Mr. Jackson shook his head. You had already built a working system before I ever saw it. I just helped refine what was already there. The vision was yours. The determination to create something meaningful despite limited resources, that's what set your project apart. Still, Miguel insisted, I want to make sure everyone knows you helped, that your engineering knowledge was part of this. The custodian considered this request. Tell you what, you can mention my contribution if you want, but more importantly, use this opportunity to keep building, keep solving real problems. That's how you honor any mentorship you receive, by carrying the work forward. As Mr. Jackson continued his cleaning rounds, Miguel returned to his design improvements, his mind buzzing with new ideas, modifications that could make the system more effective, more accessible to communities in need. The project that had begun as a school assignment had transformed into something far more significant, a potential path forward, a purpose that aligned his interests with genuine human needs. That night, Miguel wrote in his notebook, not equations or diagrams, but reflections on the week's events. Via unexpected recognition, the opportunities unfolding, the realization that his perspective, shaped by necessity, resourcefulness, and personal experience, offered something valuable to the world, a different way of seeing problems and solutions, perhaps. He wrote, limitations are not obstacles, but invitations to find new paths forward. Perhaps what seems like disadvantage can become advantage when it forces us to think differently, to use what others overlook. The district science competition was held at Parkside University's main auditorium, a sprawling glass and steel structure that intimidated Miguel as he approached it, carrying his improved filtration system, now housed in a proper display case provided by the Environmental Resources Department. Carmen walked beside him, dressed in her best clothes, having taken a rare day off from both jobs to attend this important event. Remember Mijo, she said as they neared the entrance. You belong here, your ideas matter regardless of what happens today. Miguel nodded, though butterflies swarmed in his stomach. The magnitude of the opportunity finally hitting him. He would be presenting alongside middle and high school students whose projects had been developed with greater resources, more advanced knowledge, and years of additional education, competitors whose confidence and articulation would likely far exceed his own. Inside the auditorium, buzzing with activity, Miguel was directed to his assigned station in the elementary school division, where his project looked noticeably different from those surrounding him. Most featured colorful pre-made display boards, elaborate computer presentations, and expensive materials, while his retained its core of recycled components. Despite recent improvements, focus on what makes your project special. Principal Warren had advised during Miguel's preparation sessions, the practical application, the accessibility, the real-world problem-solving, that's what impressed the judges before. As Miguel arranged his display, Carmen helping position each component perfectly, a university student approached, wearing a volunteer badge. Miguel Rodriguez, I'm Sarah, your student guide for today. I'll be helping you navigate the competition, answering questions and making sure you have what you need. Miguel looked up, surprised by this personalized attention. Thank you, but I thought guides were only for the featured presenters. Sarah smiled. You are a featured presenter in the Environmental Solutions category, remember? That's why you're presenting twice, once in the elementary division and again in the Special Cross Division showcase this afternoon. This confirmation of his special status both reassured and terrified Miguel. He had known about the dual presentations intellectually, but hearing it stated so matter-of-factly made the reality inescapable. He, Miguel Rodriguez from Sunrise Apartments, would be presenting his work alongside advanced students, whose scientific knowledge far exceeded his own as the morning unfolded. Miguel observed the judges moving methodically through the elementary division projects, stopping at each station for brief evaluations, his anxiety growing with each approaching step. When they finally reached his display, he took a deep breath and began his explanation. This is a multi-stage water filtration system designed using recycled and locally available materials. He started his voice steadier than expected. It addresses the global challenge of clean water access, particularly in areas with limited resources, emergency situations, or developing regions. The judges, middle school science teachers, and local engineers listened attentively as Miguel demonstrated his system, explaining recent improvements, including a solar disinfection component and more efficient filtration media. Their questions probed his understanding, pushing him to explain the scientific principles behind each design choice. Impressive work, particularly for an elementary student, one judge commented, making notes on her clipboard. Your understanding of filtration principles exceeds grade-level expectations significantly. As the elementary judging concluded, Miguel felt cautiously optimistic. His presentation had gone smoothly. The judges' responses suggested genuine interest in his approach, yet he knew the featured presentation would be an entirely different challenge, with university professors, environmental experts, and even industry professionals evaluating his work. During the lunch break, Miguel and Carmen found a quiet corner in the university cafeteria to eat sandwiches they had brought from home. Around them, other competitors and their families enjoyed purchased meals, discussing their projects with animated confidence. You did wonderfully this morning, Carmen assured him, the way you explained everything so clearly, answering all their questions. Miguel nodded, picking at his sandwich. The elementary judges were nice, but this afternoon's presentation. He trailed off. Will be different, yes, Carmen acknowledged. But Miguel, remember something important. Your project wasn't selected for the showcase because of flashy technology or expensive components. It was selected because it offers a real solution to a real problem. That's what makes it valuable. Before Miguel could respond, Dr. Chen appeared at their table. Miguel, I hoped I'd find you before the showcase presentations. I wanted to check if you need anything technical support, display adjustments. Miguel shook his head. I think I'm okay. Thank you, Dr. Chen. Just a little nervous about presenting to the advanced judges. Dr. Chen's expression softened slightly. Understandable but unnecessary. The judging panel is looking for innovation, problem solving, and potential impact, not polish or complexity. In fact, some of the most meaningful scientific advancements come from elegantly simple solutions to complex problems. She glanced at her watch. The showcase begins in 40 minutes. I suggest reviewing your key points, focusing on why your approach matters, not just how it works. After Dr. Chen departed, Miguel followed her advice, mentally organizing his presentation around the why of his project, the communities. It could help the accessibility of its design, the practicality of its application. When the announcement came for featured presenters to take their positions, Carmen hugged him tightly, whispering, "You already won, Miguel, by creating something that matters." The university's main presentation hall was significantly more formal than the auditorium where the division competitions were held. A raised stage with professional lighting and microphones, individual stations for each featured presenter, and a judging panel seated at a long table. Facing the stage, Miguel's station positioned between a high school student's sophisticated air quality monitoring system and a middle schooler's biodegradable plastic alternative. The showcase format differed from the morning competition, each presenter given 5 minutes for a formal presentation, followed by 3 minutes of questions from the judging panel. Miguel watched as competitors before him delivered polished speeches accompanied by professional slideshows, their confidence and technical vocabulary impressive, their projects clearly reflecting months, if not years, of development. When Miguel's turn came, he approached the microphone heart pounding, finding Carmen's face in the audience, her encouraging smile anchoring him before beginning clean. Water is not a luxury, it's a necessity, yet millions of people worldwide lack access to safe drinking water. He started his voice small but clear in the amplified space. Conventional filtration systems are often expensive, require specialized materials, or depend on infrastructure that doesn't exist in many communities. My project addresses this gap as Miguel continued explaining his filtration system, its design principles and potential applications. His initial nervousness gave way to the genuine passion he felt for the problem he was addressing. His voice strengthening his gestures, becoming more confident when he demonstrated the system pouring contaminated water through the stages and showing the resulting improvement. The auditorium fell silent, every eye focused on the transformation occurring in real time. This isn't just a science project, Miguel concluded. It's a practical solution that could be implemented anywhere using materials that might otherwise be discarded. It's not perfect, it doesn't remove all contaminants, but it can make dangerous water significantly safer when no alternatives exist. Sometimes the most important innovations aren't about creating something new, but about looking differently at what already exists. The silence that followed felt eternal before applause began spreading through the auditorium, the judging panel leaning toward each other in whispered consultation. Before the head judge, a distinguished environmental scientist leaned toward his microphone. "Thank you, Miguel. Impressive work, especially considering your age and resources. I have a question though. How would you scale the system for community rather than individual use?" Miguel considered this. Scaling would require multiples, units working in parallel, rather than a single larger system maintaining the same basic principles but increasing capacity through repetition. This modularity is actually an advantage. Damaged components can be replaced individually without compromising the entire system. The questions continued challenging, but fair, exploring the limitations of his approach, potential improvements. Environmental impact, Miguel answered as thoroughly as his knowledge permitted, acknowledging when he reached the boundaries of his understanding. When his allotted time concluded, he returned to his station legs, shaky with adrenaline, but mind clear. With the satisfaction of having represented his work honestly, the final presentations concluded. The judges retired to a private room for deliberation. Miguel, joining Carmen in the audience to watch a series of scientific demonstrations presented by university students while they awaited the results. "Regardless of what happens now, Miguel," Carmen whispered, "I have never been more proud. You spoke with such clarity, such purpose." The judges' deliberation continued for nearly an hour, while demonstrations and presentations filled the time. Miguel found himself unable to focus on these distractions, his mind replaying his performance, analyzing what he could have explained. Better questions he might have answered more thoroughly. Carmen sat beside him, occasionally squeezing his hand in silent support. Principal Warren made his way through the crowded auditorium to join them. "Outstanding presentation, Miguel, truly outstanding. Regardless of the results you've represented, Washington Elementary, exceptionally well." Miguel thanked him automatically, though his attention remained fixed on the side door through which the judges would eventually emerge. The competition had taken on a significance beyond ribbons or recognition. It had become a test of his ideas, their validity, their potential impact, their worth in the wider world. Finally, the judges returned, filing onto the stage with ceremonial gravity. The head judge, Dr. Marshall from the university's Environmental Science Department, approached the microphone. "Thank you all for your patience. We've completed our evaluations and are ready to announce our decisions." The auditorium quieted as Dr. Marshall began with divisional awards, elementary, middle, and high school categories. Miguel sat straighter when the elementary division was announced. Third place in the elementary division goes to Emily Shan for her research on plant growth in varying soil conditions. Applause. Followed as a smiling fourth grader accepted her bronze medal. Second place in the elementary division goes to Miguel Rodriguez for his multi-stage water filtration system using recycled materials. Carmen gasped beside him as Miguel processed the announcement he had placed in the divisional competition, an achievement itself for a project built from discarded materials. Yet he couldn't help feeling a flicker of disappointment, having hoped his unique approach might have earned the top spot first. Place in the elementary division goes to Marcus Green for his solar-powered agricultural irrigation system. Miguel applauded politely as Marcus, a confident sixth grader from an affluent suburban school, accepted his gold medal. The boy's project had indeed been impressive, with 3D printed components and computerized monitoring systems. His father, a renowned agricultural engineer, had clearly provided substantial guidance. As the middle and high school division winners were announced, Miguel gradually accepted his second-place finish, a respectable outcome considering the competition. Still, he couldn't help wondering if his recycled materials approach had ultimately been viewed as less serious, less scientific than more conventional. Projects now. For our special category awards, Dr. Marshall continued, these recognize exceptional work that transcends divisional boundaries, addressing specific challenges or demonstrating particular excellence. Miguel's attention drifted slightly as various specialized awards were announced for categories like medical research, technological innovation, mathematical modeling, each recognizing projects that focused on particular scientific disciplines. Carmen had begun gathering their things, preparing for departure, when Dr. Marshall's words suddenly cut through Miguel's distraction. Our final and most prestigious award. The Parkside Innovation Prize recognizes work that demonstrates exceptional creativity, practical impact, and potential for real-world application regardless of the competitor's age or resources. This award includes a $5,000 development grant and mentorship opportunities with university faculty. The auditorium grew silent as Dr. Marshall paused for a dramatic effect. This year's Innovation Prize Committee evaluated all projects across all divisions, looking for work that might genuinely change lives, solve meaningful problems, or approach challenges from new perspectives. Miguel sat perfectly, still hardly breathing, as Dr. Marshall continued. The Parkside Innovation Prize for this year's competition is awarded to Miguel Rodriguez for his multi-stage water filtration system using recycled materials, a solution that elegantly addresses a critical global challenge through accessible design and practical application. For several seconds, Miguel couldn't process what he'd heard, couldn't understand why Carmen was suddenly embracing him, tears streaming down her face, why Principal Bob Warren was shaking his hand enthusiastically, why the auditorium had erupted in applause only when Dr. Marshall repeated, "Miguel Rodriguez, please come to the stage to accept the Innovation Prize." Did reality begin to penetrate? Legs unsteady, Miguel made his way to the stage where Dr. Marshall waited alongside Dr. Chen and several university officials. A large certificate and trophy displayed prominently on a pedestal. "Congratulations, Miguel," Dr. Marshall said, shaking his hand before the assembled audience. "Your work exemplifies what the Innovation Prize represents: practical solutions to real-world problems accessible to those who need them most." Miguel accepted the trophy, looking out at the sea of faces, some showing surprise, others genuine appreciation. Carmen in the front row now openly crying with joy, Principal Warren beaming beside her, and unexpectedly, Mr. Jackson standing at the back of the auditorium in his custodial uniform, having come directly from his shift to witness this Moment, would you like to say a few words? Dr. Marshall asked, gesturing to the microphone. Miguel hesitated, then nodded, stepping forward, gathering his thoughts before speaking. Thank you for this honor, which I never expected, he began, his voice small but clear in the amplified space. My project exists because clean water shouldn't be a luxury, it should be accessible to everyone. Gaining confidence, Miguel continued, I built this system because my cousin got sick from contaminated water, because millions of people face this problem daily, because sometimes the materials for conventional solutions aren't available where they're needed most. I wanted to create something that could help people, like my family back in El Salvador, people who can't afford expensive filtration systems but deserve clean water just as much as anyone. He paused, looking at the trophy in his hands. This recognition isn't just for me, it's for everyone who helped my mother, who supported me even while working. 2 jobs, Mrs. Patel at the public library, who helped me research Mr. Jackson, our school custodian, who shared his engineering knowledge, and everyone who believes that good ideas can come from unexpected places, that limitations can sometimes inspire better solutions than unlimited resources. As Miguel concluded his impromptu speech, the auditorium erupted in applause, more enthusiastic than before. Dr. Chen stepped forward to explain the development grant and mentorship program that accompanied. The prize opportunities that would allow Miguel to refine his design work with engineering faculty, potentially develop his system for wider implementation. Returning to his seat, trophy clutched carefully in his hands, Miguel found himself surrounded by congratulations from competitors, parents, teachers, even Marcus Green, the elementary division winner, acknowledging the significance of Miguel's achievement. I can't believe it, Mama, Miguel whispered to Carmen when they finally had a moment. Alone. The Innovation Prize? Carmen wiped away tears of joy. I can believe it, the judges saw what I've always seen, Miguel. Your special mind, your good heart, your ability to create something valuable from what others overlook, Principal Warren approached. With a local reporter in tow, Miguel, Channel 5 News would like to interview you about your project and this prestigious award, if that's all right, as Miguel nodded, accepting this new development. Carmen stepped back, watching with pride as her son explained his filtration system to the reporter with growing confidence, answering questions about his inspiration, his process, his plans for the development grant, his voice growing stronger with each response. Mrs. Rodriguez, Dr. Chen appeared. Beside Carmen, your son has exceptional potential. His approach to problem solving is precisely what we try to nurture in our engineering programs. Practical, creative, resourceful. I'd like to discuss opportunities for Miguel moving forward. Special programs, mentorship, perhaps even scholarship pathways when he reaches high school age. Carmen listened with wonder as Dr. Chen outlined possibilities that had seemed unimaginable just months before. Educational opportunities, extended mentorship, advanced placement. The doors that were suddenly opening for Miguel, not through privilege or connection, but through his own creativity, determination, and genuine problem-solving ability. Across the auditorium, Miguel concluded his interview. The reporter, clearly impressed by his articulate explanations, his practical knowledge, his genuine passion for addressing water accessibility. When he returned to Carmen's side, clutching his innovation prize, the expression on his face reflected not just triumph, but transformation. The quiet, uncertain boy finding his voice, his purpose, his place. What happens now, Miguel? Principal Warren asked. With the development grant and university mentorship, what do you hope to accomplish? Miguel considered this question. Seriously, I want to make the system better, more effective, easier to replicate, then share the design widely so communities that need it can implement it themselves. That's the real prize, not the trophy, but seeing my idea help people who need clean water. His answer reflected a wisdom beyond his years, an understanding that recognition was valuable not as an end in itself, but as a means to create greater impact, to extend the reach of a solution that mattered to transform possibility into reality through resources now available to him. 1 year later, sunlight streamed through the windows of Parkside University's engineering lab, where Miguel Rodriguez, now 12 years old, carefully adjusted the flow rate on his latest filtration prototype. Beside him, Dr. Malik, a graduate student in environmental engineering, made notes on a tablet. "The throughput is much better with the modified intake design," Dr. Malik observed, "and the filtration efficiency remains above 92%. Impressive balance." Miguel nodded, studying the water flow. "I think we can still improve the sediment layer, though it's clogging faster than it should with heavy particulate loads." In the year since winning the Innovation Prize, Miguel's life had transformed in ways both profound and subtle. The development grant had provided resources to refine his filtration system through multiple iterations, each improving on the last. The university mentorship program had connected him with faculty and graduate students who treated his ideas with respect, challenging him to think more deeply, test more rigorously, document more thoroughly. Yet the most significant changes weren't in the project itself, but in Miguel, the once quiet boy who had worked alone in the margins, now collaborating confidently with university researchers, presenting his findings at environmental conferences, even demonstrating his system for international aid organizations interested in its potential applications in disaster relief and developing regions. "Ready for Saturday's symposium?" Dr. Malik asked, referencing the upcoming Youth Innovation Showcase, where Miguel would present his latest design. "I hear there will be representatives from several NGOs in attendance." Miguel looked up from the filtration system. "Almost. I need to finish the instructional materials. The whole point is making this replicable for communities that need it." This focus on accessibility remained central to Miguel's approach, despite access to advanced materials and testing equipment. He insisted on maintaining versions that could be built entirely from locally available resources, creating detailed guides in multiple languages, with simple illustrations that required minimal literacy to follow. The lab door opened as Dr. Chen entered. Carrying a folder, Miguel, perfect timing. "I have news from El Salvador." Miguel set down his tools immediately. They implemented the system. It worked. Dr. Chen smiled. "Even better than expected. The Community Health Center reports a 68% reduction in waterborne illness since implementing your filtration design across the village. They've sent photos, documentation, and water quality readings." She handed Miguel the folder containing reports and photographs showing his filtration system. Installed throughout his cousin Alberto's village, women and children gathering around communal filtration stations, clean water flowing into their containers. Miguel's hands trembled slightly as he studied the images, his original vision now realized. "In the very community that had inspired it, your mother called," Dr. Chen added. "She's bringing empanadas to celebrate when she picks you up. Apparently, she's already told everyone at both her jobs." Miguel smiled, picturing Carmen proudly sharing the news with co-workers at the hospital cafeteria and convenience store. In the year since his victory, she had reduced her workload to a single full-time position at the Innovation Prize stipend and subsequent grant funding, allowing their family financial breathing room for the first time. The move to a better apartment closer to the university, where Miguel now attended weekly mentorship sessions, the occasional luxury of store-bought rather than homemade science supplies. "I should call Alberto." Miguel said he won't believe the system is actually helping his village. After completing his lab work, Miguel packed his backpack with textbooks and notebooks, a mix of regular 7th grade assignments and the advanced environmental engineering materials provided by his university mentors. The dual educational tracks had become his new normal, challenging but fulfilling, each context offering different kinds of growth at the university lobby. He found Mr. Jackson waiting his custodial uniform. Exchanged for casual clothes, there he is, the engineer himself. The former Army specialist greeted him. "How's the modified intake design working? Better flow rate, same filtration efficiency." Miguel reported, falling easily into their technical discussions. Mr. Jackson had become a regular participant in Miguel's project, first as an informal advisor, then as an official consultant, his practical field experience complementing the academic approach of the university researchers. They walked together toward the campus exit, where Carmen would meet them. "The symposium materials are almost ready," Miguel continued, "but I wanted your opinion on the emergency deployment version for disaster scenarios." Their conversation continued the mentor-student relationship that had begun in a school classroom, after hours now formalized through the university's Community Expertise Program, which had recruited Mr. Jackson as a part-time technical advisor, recognizing the value of his practical experience. Despite his lack of formal credentials, "Miguel?" a voice called from across the quad. Liam White approached, carrying a robotics kit. "Did you get my email about the STEM club competition? We need to finalize the team lineup." The most unexpected development of the past year had been Miguel's changing relationship with former classmates, particularly Liam, the robotics enthusiast, who had once mocked his recycled materials project, now seeking his collaboration on team competitions. Their complementary skills, Liam's programming expertise and Miguel's practical problem-solving, proving unexpectedly effective. "I'll review the proposal tonight," Miguel promised, "but I think your autonomous navigation approach makes sense for the obstacle course." Challenge. As Liam continued toward the robotics lab, Carmen arrived, her hospital cafeteria shift complete. "Mijo, ready for dinner? We're meeting Dr. Chen and Mr. Jackson at the restaurant to celebrate the El Salvador implementation." In the car, Miguel showed Carmen the photographs from his cousin's village, her eyes filling with tears as she recognized landscapes from her childhood, now transformed by her son's invention. "Your father's village," she said softly. "His people now drinking clean water because of what you created, Miguel. It's like completing a circle." The mention of his father, once rare, now occurred more frequently as Carmen had begun sharing stories of the engineer who had struggled with depression, who had ultimately left them, but whose legacy lived on through Miguel's inherited gifts, now flourishing through opportunity and support at the restaurant. A small celebration unfolded, Dr. Chen, Mr. Jackson, Principal Warren, and Mrs. Patel joining them, the librarian who had first helped Miguel research water filtration, now a regular participant in his academic journey, all raising glasses to toast the successful implementation in El Salvador to Miguel. Dr. Chen offered, whose original vision has now become reality, improving lives in tangible, measurable ways. Miguel accepted their congratulations with growing comfort, still preferring action to attention, still more interested in problem-solving than recognition, yet increasingly understanding that visibility brought resources, connections, opportunities to expand impact. Later that evening, as Miguel refined his presentation for Saturday's symposium, Carmen entered his room, now filled with books, engineering materials, prototypes in various stages of development. A desk that had been a birthday gift from his university mentors, replacing the kitchen table where he had once worked. "A letter arrived for you today," she said hesitantly. "From your father." Miguel looked up, startled. It had been nearly 5 years since they had received any communication from the man who had left them. "He wrote to me? Why now?" Carmen handed him the envelope, postmarked from Guatemala City. "He saw you on an international news program about young innovators. Seems your filtration system has reached beyond El Salvador." With trembling hands, Miguel opened the letter, reading his father's words, expressions of pride, regret, wonder at the son who had surpassed him, creating solutions he had never imagined, apologies too late, but sincere questions about Miguel's work, his future, his life. "He wants to reconnect," Miguel said finally, looking up at Carmen. "He says he's been sober for 2 years, working as an engineering consultant for a water management project." Carmen sat beside him. "How do you feel about that, mijo? You don't have to respond if you don't want to." Miguel considered the question carefully. "I think I think I would like to show him my work someday, not for his approval, but because we might both learn something, because we might understand each other better through the problems we're trying to solve. His response reflected the wisdom he had developed alongside his technical knowledge, understanding that connections were complex, that people like ideas could evolve, that bridges could sometimes be built between past and present through shared purpose, through common language. The following morning, Miguel arrived early at the university lab to complete final adjustments to his prototype for the symposium. Dr. Malik already there reviewing test results. I've been thinking about applications beyond drinking water, Miguel said, as they worked industrial contamination, agricultural runoff, larger-scale implementations of the same principles. Dr. Malik smiled, always expanding the vision. That's what makes you different. Miguel, most people try to perfect one solution. You're always seeing new applications, new possibilities. Miguel considered this. Problems don't exist in isolation, so solutions shouldn't either. What works in one context often works in others, with adaptation.